Friends, if you are looking forward to watching one of the most talked about upcoming films of the year, The Pickup 2025, then you're in for something truly special. This is not just another movie. It's a blend of suspense, drama, and entertainment that promises to keep you hooked from start to finish. And today, we're going to take you on a complete journey through everything you need to know about it. If you're visiting our channel for the very first time, make sure you subscribe so you never miss out on our in-depth movie talks, exciting updates, and behind-the-scenes scoops. In today's video, we will explore exactly what The Pickup 2025 is, what makes it stand out, and where you'll be able to watch it. I will share with you all the insider details, from the OTT platform or satellite channel that will stream or broadcast it to its expected release schedule. We're not stopping there. We'll also take a close look at the technical aspects of this film. From the early days of pre-production, where the script was shaped and the casting was finalized, to the filming process, including stunning locations and the equipment used to bring the visuals to life, all the way through to post-production, where editing, sound design, and visual effects polish the final masterpiece. We will talk about the music department and how the soundtrack plays a vital role in building the film's mood and energy. I'll also share details about the budget, how much was invested into making it as impactful as possible, and the box office expectations for this project. Was it a risky investment or a calculated blockbuster in the making? We'll go through it all in detail. Then comes the story. Without spoiling too much, I will give you a sneak peek into its gripping plot that's filled with twists and unexpected turns. We'll break down the main storyline and explore what kind of world The Pickup 2025 creates for its audience. I'll also talk about the performances of the cast, who's playing which role, how they prepared for their characters, and how their performances shaped the film's impact. On top of that, we will explore behind-the-scenes facts, moments from filming, challenges faced by the crew, creative decisions that shaped the final cut, and interesting trivia that fans will love. Whether it's the director's vision, the cinematographer's artistry, or the costume designer's attention to detail, we'll uncover everything that makes this production unique. So, friends, make sure you stick with me until the very end of this video because The Pickup 2025 has so much to offer, and I promise you, by the time we're done, you'll be even more excited to watch it. Now, let's begin our journey into the fascinating world of The Pickup 2025. The Pickup 2025 opens like a small, cool dagger of a scene, a lonely stretch of highway at dawn, a battered pickup idling outside a roadside diner, and our protagonist, quiet, sharply observant, carrying more weight than his worn jacket suggests, sliding behind the wheel. From there, the film sets up a deceptively simple premise: one impulsive ride, one wrong turn, and everything that follows. What makes the narrative sing is how the movie treats that pickup not just as a vehicle but as a narrative engine and metaphor. It ferries people, secrets, and choices, and the film keeps nudging you to pay attention to what gets left in the bed of the truck. The early scenes lay groundwork in plain, cinematic beats, introductions to the world, to the protagonist's routine, to the small community of characters who orbit the main story, but the storytelling quickly becomes playful with time. Flashbacks arrive like whispered negotiations, not heavy-handed info dumps, and a series of intercut memories slowly reorients the meaning of scenes we already accepted as straightforward. Structurally, the film leans on a hybrid of linear momentum and stitched-in nonlinear revelations. The present-day road trip provides forward propulsion while the past is revealed in fragments, each fragment reconfiguring our emotional compass. Key turning points are staged as intimate, character-driven events rather than bombastic plot tricks. The inciting incident, a chance encounter after a rainstorm, when the protagonist gives a mysterious stranger a lift, pivots the film into its second act. What seemed like a courtesy becomes an obligation as the stranger's backstory surfaces, involving debt, an estranged child, and a threatened local crime figure. The midpoint reframe is particularly smart. A piece of evidence discovered in the pickup's toolbox reframes the stranger's motives and forces alliances to reshuffle. Someone who looked like a helper becomes suspect, and a peripheral character's earlier offhand comment snaps into focus as a deliberate clue. Conflict unfolds on two levels at once. External pressures, a small-time criminal network, a tense confrontation with local law enforcement, and the literal hazards of the road, and internal ones, guilt, the temptation to run, and the fragile stitches of trust that form between the people in the truck. The film uses perspective shifts, spending a scene filtered through the stranger's half-memory, another through the protagonist's guarded silence, to create a push-pull where truth is always one scene away from being overturned. Emotional stakes rise naturally because the characters are written as people whose history matters. Their decisions feel earned, not engineered. Key confrontations are staged in surprisingly quiet spaces: a motel room, a late-night gas station, the back of a churchyard, which gives the climactic sequence extra weight. Rather than a single explosive set piece, the climax is a sequence of moral reckonings culminating in a tense, beautifully choreographed chase that refuses to rely on pyrotechnics and instead trades in breathless close-ups and a ticking, diegetic soundscape that makes every squeal of tires feel decisive. The soundtrack and visual language track the narrative's emotional shifts. Daylight scenes on the open road feel airy and possible, while the film's nighttime sequences contract into tight frames and dusky palettes that make the characters' secrets feel physically present. The resolution is brave in its restraint. The final scenes choose ambiguity over tidy closure, offering catharsis through small actions: a returned photograph, a stopped truck left idling at the edge of town, rather than declaring moral verdicts. Thematically, the film riffs on agency and coincidence, on how small acts of kindness can entangle you, and how the past keeps hitching rides into the present. The Pickup 2025 delights in the middle ground between noir and human drama. It experiments with time and perspective enough to keep viewers actively assembling the story, yet it never forgets to be emotionally accessible, letting you feel every choice as if it were your own. The characters in the Pickup 2025 are not painted with a single brushstroke, but built in layers you peel back as the film rolls on, which is what keeps the emotional engine humming. The protagonist arrives as a study in restraint, quiet, watchful, someone who measures risk by the angle of a glance. And his growth is not a sudden reveal, but a series of small recalibrations, each triggered by a choice rather than an explanatory line of dialogue. When he gives the stranger a lift, he isn't simply opening a door. He's starting to unloosen the armor he's lived in, and the film makes those loosening moments tangible: a hand that doesn't flinch, a cigarette left unlit, a photograph smoothed on the dashboard, so we feel change in gestures as much as in plot. The stranger is written with sympathetic opacity. Initially coded as danger by circumstance and rumor, he is gradually humanized through fragments of past life, a debt that smells of desperation, mentions of an estranged child that flip his silhouette from threat to wounded figure, and his arc travels from defensive self-preservation toward a grudging honesty, driven less by melodrama and more by private admissions in the back of the truck and the small ways he starts to protect others in lieu of himself. Secondary characters are compact but effective. The diner owner who knows local histories and functions as conscience and chorus, the minor criminal whose bravado masks a terror of being small within a system, and even law enforcement, which the film cleverly renders neither wholly friend nor enemy, but as pressure that reveals character by how each person responds to it. Relationships do the heavy lifting here. The fragile trust between protagonist and stranger is the movie's emotional gearbox. Scenes where they share silence, eat, or argue over a map are narrated as character tests more than plot beats, and they force decisions that reveal values. Does one run, cover up, confess, or stay and face consequences? Motivations are seldom spelled out in neat speeches. They're earned through repetition, a line of dialogue echoed later, a trickle of memory, so a character's transformation feels like accreting weight rather than a switch being flipped. Conflicts externalize inner fractures. The criminal network isn't only an obstacle, but a mirror showing how easily the protagonist could have become complicit, while the child's absence haunts choices and supplies the film's tenderness. The screenplay favors action and implication over explanation, so you watch characters evolve through dilemmas that make you pick a side. The midpoint reveal, an object found in the pickup that reframes someone's truth, forces rapid moral sorting and creates believable ripples. Alliances shift, loyalties are tested, and characters make compromises that cost them something. Performance-wise, the film rewards restraint. Small looks, missed answers, and the softening of posture carry more narrative weight than big confessions. Even when some tertiary figures aren't explored to the fullest, they function as necessary pressure points that highlight the lead's growth. The film's final emotional texture rests not on tidy redemption or punishment, but on altered trajectories, relationships left open, a character walking away from old habits, another learning to accept help, so that development feels lived in. You leave the story with the sense that these people have changed in ways that matter because those changes were earned by choices, not by exposition. Performance-wise, the Pickup 2025 works like a masterclass in how to make acting feel invisible while still letting every choice resonate. The cast doesn't just inhabit their characters. They inhabit the spaces between dialogue, the pauses, the unsaid sentences that carry just as much weight as the spoken ones. The lead actor, playing the protagonist, delivers a performance so finely tuned it feels like he's speaking an entirely separate language in micro-expressions. You can see his entire thought process in the way his fingers flex on the steering wheel when he's deciding whether to trust someone, or in the slight shift of his shoulders when a conversation hits too close to home. Early in the film, his posture is closed and guarded, but as events unfold, small details, leaning an inch closer to someone in the cab, lingering on a shared glance, letting his hands drop from a defensive fold to rest openly, show his transformation more clearly than any speech could. The Stranger's actor matches that subtlety with a performance built on controlled unpredictability. He arrives on screen as a presence that makes you sit forward, all sharp edges and calculated wariness, his dialogue clipped and cautious, his movements quick and contained. But as the film peels back his layers, his delivery shifts, silences stretch, his voice cracks in half-finished sentences, and there's a sudden heaviness in the way he stands still, as though the weight of his past is finally catching up. The moment he reveals fragments of his history isn't played for melodrama. It's quiet, almost reluctant, and all the more powerful because it feels like we're intruding on something private. The supporting cast amplifies the authenticity. The diner owner, with only a handful of scenes, somehow becomes the film's moral compass. Every time she's on screen, she grounds the tone through body language that's part maternal warmth and part firm pushback, the kind that forces characters to confront themselves without a word of judgment. The small-time criminal is an electric presence. He struts and postures with swagger, but the twitch in his jaw and the dart of his eyes tell a different story, a man scared of being small in a big, unforgiving world. Even the local law enforcement, who could have been written as stock obstacles, get shaded performances, the clipped cadence, the long stares, the sense that their allegiance is situational rather than moral, adding a layer of unpredictability every time they appear. What truly elevates the film is the chemistry between the leads. The camera often lingers in moments of stillness, a long drive with no dialogue, a quiet meal, a shared cigarette that never gets lit, and the actors make those moments speak volumes. There's a scene where the two sit in the truck, night pressing against the windows, saying nothing for a full 30 seconds. You can almost feel the air shift between them as trust begins to take root. The director leans into this by using longer takes and tight close-ups, letting the cast fill every frame with meaning. Fingers trace the rim of a coffee mug, eyes flick toward a map and back, a breath catches. Each choice builds the world without breaking the spell of realism. Standout beats come in understated packages. In the motel confrontation, the lead's voice drops to a whisper just as the tension peaks, pulling the audience closer rather than pushing them back. At the late-night gas station, a brief exchange between the stranger and a minor character unfolds like a negotiation between pride and desperation, every pause loaded. The churchyard scene near the end is devastatingly quiet. No music, no theatrics. Just two people talking like they might never see each other again, and the ache comes from how much they don't say. What makes these performances so compelling is their refusal to tell the audience what to feel. No one spells out their pain, fear, or longing. It's left for us to pick up in a glance, in the way someone leaves a photograph in the glove box, or the way a voice falters mid-word. You believe these characters existed long before the opening scene, and you believe they will keep living and making choices after the credits roll. It's not just good acting, it's the kind of lived-in performance that makes the story feel less like fiction and more like something we've stumbled across and been allowed to witness. The director of the Pickup 2025 doesn't just guide the story, they architect it, building a film where every tone shift, every camera move, and every pause feels intentional. From the very first frame, you can sense the control over mood. The opening is not a rush of action, but a slow, deliberate establishing sequence. The pale light of dawn spreading across an empty highway, the camera gliding at a measured pace as the pickup rolls into view, the world waking up around it. This opening choice sets the tempo for the entire film, patient, observant, quietly tense, and it invites the audience to lean in rather than sit back. Stylistically, the director operates with an economy of excess. There's no wasted movement, either in how characters navigate a space or how the camera frames them. Long takes are used not as stylistic flexes but as trust. Trust in the actors to inhabit a moment fully, and trust in the audience to notice the small tells. A flicker in the eyes, a shifting jawline, the weight of a breath. The film breathes in a rhythm that alternates between expansiveness and compression. Wide, unhurried shots of the road, where negative space dominates and the characters seem swallowed by landscape, are counterbalanced with tight, intimate interiors that feel almost airless, pulling you into the closeness of the truck's cab or a dim motel room where tension hums under every word. The director's use of visual motifs is precise. Mirrors and reflections reappear as quiet thematic anchors, a side mirror catching the stranger's expression when he thinks no one is watching, a diner's window glass reflecting two characters who aren't speaking but are thinking the same thought. These moments aren't flashy. They're invitations for the audience to reread the scene, to notice what's lurking in the periphery. When the narrative shifts into flashbacks or nonlinear reveals, the transitions are seamless, often bridged by sound or a match cut rather than explicit cues. The hum of an engine might carry over from present to past, or a shot of the road at night might dissolve into a memory of another road years ago, making the structure feel like lived memory rather than a neat cinematic device. Pacing is where the director's discipline really shows. The first act is a slow simmer, character-driven, intentionally giving space for relationships to form naturally. Nothing is rushed, but nothing drags either. Every quiet beat is doing work. Once the midpoint lands, with the discovery of the object in the pickup's toolbox that reshapes the central conflict, the tempo tightens. Editing becomes more decisive, scenes clip shorter, and the camera's movement grows more assertive. In the third act, especially during confrontations, the compositions subtly tilt off balance and the cuts quicken, mirroring the destabilization of the character's control. Sound design is wielded like a storytelling tool rather than an afterthought. The director amplifies diegetic sound, the sputter of the truck's ignition, rain pinging on its roof, a fork scraping against a diner plate, so the audience lives inside the world. The score is intentionally restrained, arriving only in select moments so that when it does appear it strikes harder. Silence is treated as a character itself. Entire stretches play without music, forcing you to feel the awkwardness, the tension, or the intimacy of the moment. Color and lighting choices are deeply tied to mood. Day scenes on the open road are bathed in warm, dusty light, giving a false sense of ease and possibility. But as the story edges into betrayal, moral compromise, and danger, the palette shifts toward desaturated blues and silvers, and night scenes tighten into shadowy frames that make the unknown feel physically present. The pickup truck itself is lit and framed differently depending on narrative context, at times a sanctuary, at times a prison, and the way it's shot tells you which it is long before the dialogue confirms it. Blocking is another subtle storytelling weapon here. Where characters sit in the truck, how they cross a threshold into a diner, how much space they allow between themselves, these physical arrangements speak to power dynamics, trust levels, and emotional distance. In one early scene, the protagonist keeps his body angled away from the stranger while driving. By the film's closing stretch, they share an unguarded shoulder-to-shoulder frame. the camera holding long enough for the shift to sink in. The director's collaboration with the actors is evident in how performances are allowed to unfold without interference. Scenes aren't cut to shreds. They're allowed to stretch just long enough to catch an unplanned glance or an unscripted pause, suggesting a set where discovery was valued over hitting marks. This trust pays off in key emotional sequences: the late-night gas station conversation, the churchyard scene, where the restraint in performance is matched by restraint in camera movement, making the moments land with quiet force. Even the more experimental touches serve story over style. A match cut from a child's laugh to an empty swing, a crosscut between a casual roadside meal and an unseen threat closing in, a brief montage of road signs slipping by under a changing sky. These aren't random flourishes, but narrative glue, subtly knitting together emotion, place, and time. The result is a film where the director's hand is always present but never intrusive, shaping a story that feels both carefully designed and naturally unfolding. If the Pickup 2025 works as both a tense road drama and a study in human connection under pressure, it's because the director has balanced intimacy with momentum, crafting a visual and tonal language that lets small moments accumulate into something far larger, a story you don't just watch, but feel you've traveled through. Cinematography in the Pickup 2025 doesn't just document what's happening, it becomes the way the story breathes, using visual language to tell us what's unsaid, to stretch or compress time, and to make the emotional temperature of a scene tangible. The camera is never passive. It's always making choices that deepen meaning, whether it's lingering on a face a beat too long, pulling focus to an object you didn't think mattered, or framing characters so their relationship is revealed before a single line is spoken. The film's wide shots are its exhale moments, long, patient views of the open road, where the pickup is just a moving against a huge, indifferent landscape. These low-angle tracking shots let the truck's tires chew through gravel and asphalt, and the way dust catches the morning light turns travel into ritual. Aerial shots are rare and precisely placed, used not as spectacle but as punctuation, giving us just enough distance to feel the scale of isolation the characters are moving through. Then, without warning, the cinematography exhales and snaps shut. Shallow depth-of-field tight shots pull us into the cab of the truck, isolating faces so that every twitch of an eyelid or shift of breath becomes monumental. Rack focuses are used like narrative handoffs. One moment we're locked on the protagonist's face, the next on the stranger's hand hovering over a toolbox, and the shift carries more tension than dialogue could. Lighting operates like a hidden character, its moods changing with the story. Daylight sequences are warm and forgiving, leaning into natural sunlight that washes over the cab and makes the journey feel open-ended, almost hopeful. Diners and motels are lit with a nostalgic glow, amber bulbs, the low hum of fluorescent tubes, a hint of dust in the light beam, making them feel like temporary safe houses. But when the story tilts toward danger or betrayal, the light contracts. Night sequences are sculpted with harsh contrasts, practical sources like dashboard lights or motel lamps creating small islands of visibility in a sea of darkness. The cinematographer uses this to make secrecy physical. You're always aware of what's just beyond the edge of the frame, out of sight but not out of mind. Even a rain-streaked windshield becomes a visual filter, blurring the outside world and turning headlights into ghostly smears, as if the past and present are bleeding into each other. Camera movement is deliberate and mood-driven. Long, slow dolly moves and steady gimbal shots give daytime road scenes a meditative quality, encouraging us to notice the world outside the windows. In moments of conflict or urgency, the film shifts to handheld work, slightly shaky, close-in shots that mimic the character's loss of control. There's also a fascinating restraint in how the camera chooses when not to move. Some of the tensest moments are shot locked down, forcing us to sit in the discomfort with the characters rather than escape it through motion. Framing is layered with meaning. Negative space is used to make characters feel small or exposed, the protagonist standing in a vast frame where the land swallows him whole, or two characters positioned at opposite edges of the shot, separated by emptiness. Mirrors and reflections become recurring visual motifs, a side mirror revealing the stranger's glance when he's trying to hide it, a diner window reflecting both leads while they silently calculate trust. Sometimes the camera shoots through the truck's rear view or side windows, placing us in the position of an unseen observer. It feels conspiratorial, as though we're riding along in the bed of the truck, privy to truths the characters aren't saying aloud. Visually striking moments are peppered throughout. The opening dawn sequence is hypnotic. Low mist over the asphalt, a slow push as the truck emerges from shadow into light, the faint glint of chrome catching the first sunbeam. The late-night gas station confrontation is lit with stark fluorescent overheads that flatten every feature, making lies look sharper and emotions harder to hide. The churchyard scene near the film's climax is almost painterly, warm candlelight light catching in the folds of jackets, the rest of the frame in deep shadow, as if the world has contracted to only these two people and their choices. Color and texture give the film its tactile identity. Day scenes lean into sun-faded yellows and ochres, evoking long drives and heat-softened air. As tension mounts, the palette shifts to cooler blues and silvers, with night scenes desaturated to the edge of monochrome. A faint grain overlays the image, giving it a slightly worn, analog quality that makes the world feel lived in and imperfect. It's not the slick, hyper-clean look of modern digital cinematography. It has grit, a visual reminder that this story exists in dust and rust and the smell of gasoline. The camera also knows when to let a shot breathe. A slow push-in during a confession doesn't just highlight the speaker. It draws you in, inch by inch, as if the truth itself is pulling closer. A match cut from a child's laughter to an empty swing ties memory to loss without a word spoken. POV shots from inside the pickup bed create a sense of the truck as more than a setting. It becomes a confessional, a vessel of secrets that the audience is allowed to inhabit. Every visual choice, from the angle of a lens to the temperature of a bulb, builds the film's layered mood. The cinematography doesn't just make the Pickup 2025 look beautiful, it makes the world feel inhabited, heavy with history, and charged with the possibility that anything could happen on the next stretch of road. It's storytelling through images at its most immersive. You don't just watch the scenes, you feel them pressing in around you. Editing in the Pickup 2025 acts like a quiet editor's trickster. You hardly notice it at first, and then you realize it's been guiding how you feel the whole time. The film prefers to breathe in long, patient takes for character moments and then snap into tighter cuts when stakes rise, so the rhythm itself becomes a storytelling device. Early scenes luxuriate in longer coverage, a slow push into a diner, a parked truck filmed for 30 seconds while two people trade glances, which lets performances and micro-behaviors land without being chopped up by camera gymnastics. These sustained shots reward attention by turning the smallest gestures into turning points. Transitions are often seamless because they are built on sound bridges and match cuts rather than title cards. An engine hum will carry over into a flashback, a line of dialogue will be picked up by a cut to a related close-up, and L-cuts and J-cuts are used so frequently that audio leads you into the next image as much as the edit does, making jumps in time feel like memories sliding into the present. The editor loves objects as narrative pivots, a photograph, a dent in the truck bed, a toolbox lid, and trims scenes to reveal or withhold those objects at precise intervals. The mid-film discovery of something in the toolbox is timed so that preceding scenes suddenly read differently when the cut recontextualizes them, which means the editing doesn't just move the story forward. It rewrites the audience's understanding retroactively. Pacing accelerates and constricts like a nervous breath. The midpoint tightens shot length and increases cut frequency as alliances fray, while the final stretch uses quicker crosscuts and shorter coverage to create a sense of frenetic consequence without relying on spectacle. It's kinetic because of editing choices, not pyrotechnics. There are clever montage passes that compress travel and time, a sequence of road signs, sunsets, and gas station receipts stitched together with rhythmic cuts that suggest days passing, so the film avoids clogging its runtime with redundant detail while still preserving the sense of a long journey. Where some viewers might feel the first act lingers, entire scenes that could be shorter are allowed to play out. That patience is intentional. The editor is buying emotional currency, so later silences and reveals hit harder. To others, those beats might feel slow, but they're the deposits that pay off in quieter but more resonant payoffs. Editing also sculpts tension by alternating perspective-based cutting patterns. When the narrative aligns with the protagonist, we get longer, observational coverage. When it slips into the stranger's fractured memory, the cuts become jarringly elliptical, jump cutting through images to mimic a mind that can't settle. Those shifts keep the viewer off balance in exactly the way the story intends. The film avoids clumsy exposition by opting for visual edits, reaction shots, cutaways to hands, deliberate pauses, rather than explanatory dialogue, so the pacing fosters discovery over spoon-feeding. Sound and silence are edited as aggressively as picture. Entire scenes rely on diegetic sound edits, the scrape of a chair, the click of a tailgate, and stretches of near silence are held long enough that when music finally enters it feels like a flood. In the tense motel confrontation, the editor lets a single shot run so long that the eventual cut delivers a small, almost surgical shock. In the late-night gas station sequence, quick cuts between faces and neon signage ratchet anxiety up without ever resorting to montaged chaos. Even the film's few nonlinear moments are smoothed by transitional editing devices, match cuts, sound overlaps, and the visual motif of the pickup's mirror, so experiments with time enhance rather than confuse. Ultimately, the editing's job here is not to be flashy, but to be nimble. It widens to cradle intimacy, tightens to accelerate danger, and stitches past to present in ways that make revelations feel earned. The Pickup 2025 soundtrack and score feel less like background decoration and more like an additional storyteller riding shotgun. They shape atmosphere, push emotional beats, and quietly steer how we interpret nearly every scene. From the first notes, the composer establishes a pared-down palette, acoustic instruments, finger-picked guitar, a weathered harmonica, low cello, restrained strings, and a bed of ambient electronics that keeps the score contemporary without overpowering the film's lived-in textures. There are clear leitmotifs that the score returns to and reshapes. The protagonist has a spare, four-note motif, often voiced on a nylon string guitar or a muted piano, that reads as both memory and moral center. The stranger's material is rougher, a bending harmonica line or a hesitant minor key phrase that softens over the course of the film as trust accumulates, and the pickup itself gets a rhythmic, percussive motif, initially built from sampled engine pulses and tinny metallic taps that later morph into actual percussion in bigger cues, so the truck becomes a musical as well as narrative engine. The score's harmonic language leans on modal shifts and suspended chords rather than neat progressions, which creates a constant sense of expectancy. When the music resolves, it feels earned, and when it doesn't, the unresolved intervals supply lingering unease that matches the film's moral ambiguities. Diegetic music is used strategically. A jukebox or a corner radio supplies period tinge Americana in diners and gas stations, and those songs are chosen so that lyrics and mood comment on the action. A cheerful country ballad can become grievously ironic when a secret surfaces, while a lullaby on a radio can trigger a flashback and bridge past to present. What makes the soundtrack especially smart is how it blends with sound design. Engine hums, rain on a windshield, the scrape of a toolbox are often equal partners with musical elements. The composer will sometimes fold an actual engine pulse into the percussion track, so the boundary between score and environment disappears and tension feels tactile. The use of silence is expert. Key scenes, the churchyard exchange, the final close conversation in the truck, are scored down to nothing or nearly nothing, letting the absence of music amplify breathing, footsteps, and small noises. When the score returns after those silences, it lands harder, because the audience has been deprived of the emotional cue and must find it anew. Standout cues serve different dramatic functions. The opening dawn theme is a slow-building suite of arpeggiated guitar, a low cello drone, and a faint electronic wash that conveys solitude and possibility. The late-night gas station cue swaps warmth for brittle piano ostinatos and high, glassy strings that cut like neon into the frame, ratcheting anxiety. The montage of long drives and time passing becomes a rhythmic, almost propulsive piece where plucked strings and soft hand percussion mirror the truck's motion and stitch brief character moments into a single emotional thread. The midpoint reveal gets a neat reworking of the motifs. The protagonist's theme is reharmonized, The stranger's line is rehoused in a cello countermelody, and the pickup motif appears in an uneasy syncopation, musically pointing to shifted alliances. Mixing choices keep the score humble in volume but rich in presence. Often the music sits low in the mix so diegetic sounds lead, yet clever L-cuts and J-cuts let music bleed into the next image and smooth temporal jumps, which makes flashbacks feel like emotional echoes rather than technical maneuvers. Instrumentation choices nod to road movie tradition, pedal steel or harmonica as signifiers of place and loneliness, but the score resists pastiche by layering subtle synth textures and processed field recordings that give it a modern, slightly uncanny edge. The climactic sequences eschew a bombastic swell. Instead, the score tightens into rhythmic stabs, dissonant string clusters, and a single, sustained high note that pierces the chaos, its tension through density rather than volume. Finally, the film's coda returns fragments of the protagonist's motif in a sparser, altered form. A small harmonic shift suggests change without spelling out redemption, and the last sound the audience carries is a filtered, almost muffled echo of the pickup's percussive motif, leaving the emotional question open rather than neatly tied. The Pickup 2025 is quietly argumentative about the small, insistent things that remake a life. Choices that seem incidental at the moment, but accumulate into a new moral geography, and the film keeps returning to the idea that movement, literal and emotional, forces reckoning. On the surface, it's a road drama, but under that surface, it excavates responsibility, memory, and the economics of desperation. The pickup itself functions as both prop and parable, a moving repository for secrets, evidence, and discarded pasts, and the way objects keep showing up. The photograph, the toolbox, the dented bed, frames the movie's thesis that the past does not stay put. It hitches a ride and changes the present in slow, ugly, tender ways. Another major thread is the ethics of intervention. The film continually asks whether helping someone in crisis is heroic, naive, or culpable. It stages kindness as an action with ripple effects, sometimes redemptive, sometimes dangerous, and that ambiguity is where the story does its most interesting work because it refuses to offer tidy moral bookkeeping. There's also a social subtext about small-town systems and how structural scarcity pushes people into corners where survival and compromise look alike. The criminal pressures, the debts, the precarious jobs. So choices are rarely pure, and the movie's moral center is deliberately gray rather than theatrical black and white. Masculinity and vulnerability are threaded throughout without being shouted. The protagonist's guarded restraint and the stranger's brittle defensiveness are written as survival modes rather than character defects, and the film rewards tiny, human acts, handing over a photograph, sitting through a silence, as more emotionally important than grand speeches. Stylistically, the themes are earned, not tacked on, motifs in sound, image, and editing. Engine pulses folded into the score, repeated mirror shots, the toolbox as turning point, fold form into meaning, so the movie's questions feel embedded in how it's made rather than being spelled out by dialogue. That said, the film's restraint will read differently depending on the viewer. For those who love implication, the ambiguity and slow accrual of meaning allow themes to bloom organically. For viewers expecting explicit thematic signposts or cathartic closure, the same choices might feel evasive, leaving some ideas tantalizingly underdefined. The film also plays productively with coincidence and agency. Small chance encounters are staged to show how randomness collides with intention, and by the time the midpoint reveal recontextualizes earlier scenes, you realize the movie is less interested in destiny than in the ways people respond when fate hands them a dilemma. There are moments where the thematic juxtapositions are especially sharp, a lullaby on a diner radio cutting into a confession, the churchyard sequence where private history and public consequence meet, and the toolbox discovery that reframes loyalties. And those beats convert aesthetic choices, lighting, sound, performance, into moral commentary. In short, the picture treats its themes like a slow ledger. It credits small acts of mercy and debits compromises. It catalogs how memory migrates into the present, and it leaves the accounting open-ended so the viewer has to decide which balances matter. That openness is the film's deliberate strategy. inviting you to keep turning the moral pages after the credits roll rather than handing you a single, easy answer. Visual effects and CGI in the Pickup 2025 operate like a quiet collaborator rather than a showy headline act. They're there to solve problems, expand the world, and whisper the film's mood rather than shout it. Much of the film's tactile quality comes from a deliberate decision to shoot as much in camera as possible. Practical stunts with real trucks, on-set rain rigs, handheld lights, and tangible props populate foreground action so performances feel grounded. And the VFX work mostly as seamstresses, removing rigging, extending backgrounds, and augmenting practical elements where safety or scale demand it. Technical work ranges from invisible tasks, wire and rig removal, cleanup of safety gear, plate stabilization, to more visible compositing, horizon and road extensions to turn a short stretch of highway into a long, lonely route, subtle sky and light replacements at dawn and dusk that keep the palette continuous across practical and studio days, and particle sims that beef up dust, tire smoke, or the fine spray of a sudden rainstorm, so environmental texture reads like a character. The best shots are those where dozens of invisible passes, HDRI lighting captures, reflection probes, diffuse and specular renders, occlusion and shadow mattis, are layered so a digital element picks up the exact grain, lens distortion, and motion blur of the original lens, making CG hitch itself to live action without announcing itself. Standout VFX moments are quietly clever. A dawn shot where a volumetric fog pass and engine heat refraction subtly bend the light around the pickup, turning a simple road into something luminous. A nighttime gas station beat where neon reflections on wet asphalt are enhanced with screen space reflections and a couple of extra specular highlights, so faces, and signage red with cinematic depth. And the churchyard scene where a thin veil of composited mist, a soft dodge of backlight, and careful shadow relighting give the sequence an almost painterly intimacy without losing texture. Action beats use a pragmatic mix, digital doubles and stunt-enhancing composites for dangerous maneuvers, a truck swap, a narrow bridge stunt, allow aggressive framing while keeping actors safe. Then those shots are grounded by foreground practical debris and physical camera shake, so the viewer feels immediacy rather than CGI. Memory and nonlinear moments are where the team lets effects be slightly expressive, subtle 2.5D parallaxing of archival photos, ghosted overlays, and lens filter blurs that separate recollection from present. These touches are deliberately modest, stylizing without breaking the film's lived-in look. There are obvious technical niceties too, face stabilizing and texture touch-ups that preserve skin pores and breath, important in close-ups, grain matching to keep the digital plates feeling analog, and color-managed compositing so the film's warm ambers and cool nocturnes stay consistent. A few shots flirt with overpolish, an instance where a reflection reads a touch too crisp or a shadow edge is marginally soft, but those are exceptions rather than rules. Mostly the VFX department earns trust by knowing when to hide their art. Integration with sound design and grading is tight. Particle sims are married to layered whooshes. Match cuts are cleaned so CG continuity reads as a single physical action, and the final passes of HDR toning marry CG highlights to the film's textured grain profile. Overall, the film's digital work reads as serviceable craftsmanship, intelligent compositing, careful lighting matches, and modest visual flourishes that let the world feel lived in and the stakes feel immediate, while occasionally stretching into more expressive territory when memory or mood calls for it, all without calling attention away from the people sitting in the truck. Set design and locations in the Pickup 2025 work like an unspoken narrator, telling parts of the story that dialogue never touches. Every space, whether it's a cramped roadside diner or a sun-baked highway rest stop, feels like it has been lived in long before the camera arrived. The production design leans heavily into textures, peeling paint on a truck stop wall, faded advertisements on a gas pump, worn leather booths with stitching that's come loose from years of restless elbows. These are not just background details, they're storytelling clues, building a world that feels authentically inhabited. The diner counter, for example, doesn't just hold coffee mugs, it holds fingerprints, scratches, and coffee rings that hint at countless quiet conversations and arguments. The locations are chosen with a photographer's eye for how light moves across them. In the golden hour scenes, The wide-open highways stretch into hazy distance, the heat visibly rippling off the asphalt, making the audience feel the weight of time and travel. Night sequences lean into neon glows and shadowy corners, with a mix of functional and decorative light sources that shape the tone of each scene without feeling overproduced. Even indoor spaces are layered with small, almost subliminal props, half-read newspapers, a coat hung on a chair that's never claimed, tools scattered in a way that feels practical rather than staged. There's also a smart use of environmental storytelling. A rundown churchyard isn't just a backdrop. It's a silent witness to pivotal moments, its cracked stone and overgrown grass suggesting years of neglect and quiet endurance. A small-town mechanic's garage has every bolt, tool, and grease stain placed just right to reflect its owner's habits, telling you who they are without a single line of dialogue. In scenes involving movement, on the road, in truck cabins, or passing through way stations, the changing scenery works almost like a character arc, reflecting the journey's emotional beats. The choice to keep much of the setting grounded in real locations rather than fabricated sets adds to the authenticity, with the camera capturing imperfections and environmental noise you couldn't design from scratch. Even when sets are built, they're constructed with a tactile realism, floorboards that creak, walls that carry a faint shadow of past repainting, props that look like they've been borrowed from real lives rather than pulled from storage. All these elements combine to make the world of the pickup feel expansive and lived in, where every location not only frames the characters, but deepens our understanding of them. The dialogue and script in the pickup 2025 feel like they've been distilled from real-life conversations, sharp when they need to be, quiet when the moment calls for it, and never so polished that they lose authenticity. Characters don't just speak to deliver exposition. They speak to reveal themselves, sometimes intentionally, sometimes by accident. A seemingly casual exchange in a truck cab carries unspoken tensions, where the pauses, half-finished sentences, and subtle deflections say more than the words themselves. This is writing that understands silence, can be just as powerful as speech. There's a balance between everyday realism and cinematic punch. The script slips in lines that could live on in audience memory without feeling like they were engineered for a trailer. A single throwaway remark, layered with dry humor, can break tension in a way that feels earned, while a bitter confession delivered under flickering diner lights can hang in the air long after the scene changes. Even supporting characters are given dialogue that makes them feel three-dimensional, avoiding generic filler lines and instead giving them rhythms and quirks that make the world more believable. The wit in the writing isn't overplayed. It's the kind that comes from knowing the characters well enough to let them joke in their own voices. Banter feels organic, never forced, with callbacks and shared references that subtly build relationships over the course of the story. Emotional moments are carefully handled, too. When the script leans into vulnerability, it doesn't spoon-feed sentiment. Instead, it lets characters stumble over words, contradict themselves, or say the wrong thing entirely, making those beats feel messy and human. In certain key scenes, the words carry a double meaning, layered with subtext that rewards attentive viewers. A simple, "You sure?" might be laced with skepticism, longing, or quiet desperation depending on where the characters are in their arcs. That's the hallmark of a script that trusts its audience. It doesn't explain everything, it lets the viewer read between the lines. The pickup also uses repetition strategically, letting certain phrases echo in different contexts, shifting in meaning as events unfold. These verbal callbacks become emotional anchors, tying early moments of lightheartedness to later ones heavy with consequence. The result is a script that is as much about what's left unsaid as it is about the lines that hit with precision. It's a kind of writing that stays with you, not because it shouts, but because it knows exactly when to whisper. The Pickup 2025 plays with its genre in a way that feels both familiar and refreshingly unpredictable. At first glance, it seems to fit neatly into the action-crime mold, complete with tense standoffs, sudden bursts of violence, and the slow-burn unraveling of a high-stakes situation. But instead of relying solely on genre cliches, it treats them like ingredients rather than a recipe. You still get the classic beats, mysterious strangers, morally gray alliances, and the ticking clock tension, but they're often rearranged or delivered in ways that catch you off guard. Where many films in this space lean into a constant barrage of action to hold attention, the pickup isn't afraid to pause. It knows that suspense isn't just built through gunfire and car chases, but through the loaded silence between characters, the slow push of a camera as someone makes a choice, the hesitation before a deal is struck. And when the action does hit, it lands harder because it's been earned. The fights are messy and grounded rather than over-choreographed, giving them a sense of urgency that keeps you on edge. The humor in the film is carefully placed, not slapstick or forced comic relief, but the kind of dry, sometimes dark wit that emerges naturally from tense situations. It's the knowing smirk in the middle of a standoff, the deadpan one-liner that cuts through the tension without killing it. This balance of tones means that when the drama arrives, it doesn't feel overwrought. The emotional beats are grounded, and the stakes feel real because you've seen these characters outside the high-drama moments. As for fresh ideas, the pickup plays with point of view in interesting ways. Some genre films keep you locked into the hero's perspective, but here the narrative shifts subtly, giving secondary characters moments of focus that change your understanding of the story. Motives blur, and what seems like a straightforward setup reveals unexpected complications. Even the villain archetype gets shaken up, with antagonists who aren't just obstacles, but fully realized forces with their own logic and appeal. Rather than dismantling the genre entirely, the pickup treats it with a mix of respect and curiosity, keeping the audience anchored in the thrill and danger they expect, while also pulling the rug out just enough to make each turn feel earned and surprising. It's the kind of genre execution that rewards both newcomers and seasoned fans, giving just enough of the old to make you comfortable and just enough of the new to keep you leaning forward in your seat. The Pickup 2025 doesn't just tell a story about a dangerous exchange gone wrong. It quietly threads itself into larger conversations about trust, survival, and the shifting moral compass of modern society. Beneath its tense plot beats, there's a subtle but pointed reflection on the way power operates in the real world. It's not a blunt political lecture, but it isn't shy about showing how greed, loyalty, and desperation collide in a system where the rules are written by those who can bend them at will. The film draws from real-world tensions, corporate exploitation, corruption in law enforcement, and the quiet erosion of personal ethics, without turning itself into a soapbox. The characters themselves become living commentaries on these issues. Some are caught in the grind of economic desperation, making choices they'd rather avoid simply to survive. Others operate from positions of privilege, manipulating outcomes with a sense of untouchable authority. The clash between these worlds isn't presented as a tidy good versus evil battle. It's messy, morally gray, and uncomfortably familiar to anyone paying attention to current events. That familiarity makes the film's commentary sting more, because you recognize pieces of it in the news headlines you scroll past every day. What makes its social reflections effective is how naturally they're woven into the plot. When a character is forced to negotiate a deal that compromises their values, it doesn't feel like the film is hitting pause to make a statement. It feels like an organic consequence of the world it's portraying. And when corruption rears its head, it's not presented as a shocking twist, but as an inevitability in the systems these characters inhabit. That choice says as much about our reality as it does about theirs. Even cultural shifts find their way into the narrative. The pickup plays with the concept of loyalty, not just to people, but to identity, ideology, and self-preservation, in an era where alliances can be fleeting and trust is transactional. It touches on how technology and surveillance have changed the stakes of crime, how social perception can be as dangerous as the crime itself, and how the definition of justice can change depending on who's telling the story. By the time the credits roll, you've absorbed its commentary almost without realizing it. It doesn't force you to agree or disagree. It simply lays its truths alongside its fiction, letting you feel the parallels and wrestle with them yourself. That's what makes its cultural weight linger long after the last scene fades. The Pickup 2025 is the kind of movie that invites you in softly and then refuses to let you go. It builds emotional currency in small deposits so that when the film cashes out you feel the payoff rather than being told to feel it. Laughter often arrives in little, perfectly timed interjections of dry humor and mutual exasperation between characters, a deadpan retort at a diner, an awkward attempt at small talk in the cab that break tension without derailing it. Tears are earned and hushed. Intimate beats, the photograph pulled from the glove box, the churchyard admission, the moment someone chooses vulnerability over escape, scenes that land because the audience has been allowed to watch relationships form in real time. Excitement comes from carefully staged spikes, a late-night pursuit, a sudden confrontation at a gas station, a stunt that uses practical effects to create genuine danger. And these action moments feel visceral because they're contrasted against long stretches of stillness. Shock is reserved for structural jolts, like the mid-film discovery that reframes motives, which not only flips the plot but rewrites how you saw earlier scenes, making viewers want to shout at the screen and then rewind to catch the clues they missed. Engagement is engineered through active intrigue. The screenplay sprinkles visual and verbal breadcrumbs, a recurring line, a hidden object, a matching piece of mise-en-scene, so that repeat viewings reward the curious viewer who wants to reassemble the narrative puzzle, and the nonlinear reveals encourage conversations about what actually happened and why. The film's restraint is its social currency. It provokes discussion because it rarely hands out moral answers. Viewers will debate who is right or wrong, whether kindness was naive or culpable, and whether the ending is hopeful or merely unresolved, which keeps the movie alive in group chats and post-credits conversations. On a communal level, the quiet, character-first moments become the stuff of sharing. A single charged stare or a clipped line can become a gif. The score's leitmotifs are the kind of motifs people hum on the way out of the theater, and the layered production details give critics and casual fans alike something to unpack. Cinematography choices, subtle sound design moments, and the way props foreshadow decisions. The film also rewards analytical viewers. You'll notice how the editing reframes intentions, how micro-expressions flip when seen with new context, and how a seemingly throwaway exchange early on becomes devastating after the midpoint reveal, which all combine to make rewatching feel like solving a puzzle rather than revisiting the same map. Ultimately, audience reactions are likely to be mixed in the best way: laughter, empathy, adrenaline, and a few jolts of disbelief. And because the film asks more questions than it answers, it lingers. You leave wanting to argue, to reread scenes, to share clips, and to test your first impressions against friends' interpretations, which is precisely the kind of engagement a slow-burning, thoughtful road drama aims to spark. The Pickup 2025 sits in an interesting crossroads when you start stacking it against similar films in the road movie meets character drama space. On one hand, it shares DNA with titles like Hell or High Water, The Mule, and even smaller, more intimate road dramas like Nebraska, films where the journey is less about the destination and more about the fraying or tightening of human bonds along the way. Yet where those films often lean on either sharp genre beats or wistful Americana nostalgia, The Pickup takes a subtler, almost European approach to pacing and atmosphere. Its sense of movement isn't constant. Instead, it allows the road to breathe, letting silences hang and mundane details accumulate until they mean something. When compared to genre staples, it swerves away from predictable one big heist or one last ride tropes, preferring a structure built on emotional escalations rather than purely physical ones. If you line it up against other modern neo-noirs, it resists the urge to flood the frame with overly stylized grit or overexplained moralizing. Instead, it borrows a restrained visual language that feels closer to Wim Wenders or early Coen brothers than to the flashier crime dramas of recent years. Within the director's own filmography, it may feel like a quieter cousin, less overtly crowd-pleasing than their previous work, but arguably richer in texture. The thematic through-lines are still there, flawed people at turning points, decisions that ripple far beyond the moment, but here they're delivered with more patience, more trust in the audience to fill in the emotional gaps. And when placed beside its franchise or genre neighbors, The Pickup distinguishes itself by avoiding the safety net of formula. Where others might end with a neatly tied bow or a heroic flourish, this film leaves threads loose, relationships unresolved, and truths unspoken, making it a different kind of satisfying. It's the sort of comparison where the film feels both familiar enough to hook fans of the genre and distinct enough to make them realize halfway through that they're on a different kind of ride entirely. The Pickup 2025 is the kind of film where meaning lingers in the margins, and the symbolism is less about screaming for attention and more about quietly layering the narrative until it seeps into you without realizing. The recurring image of the truck itself is more than a vehicle. It becomes a moving confessional, a capsule of choices and histories the characters can't escape, no matter how many miles they put between themselves and their pasts. Its dense, faded paint and creaking parts reflect the emotional wear of its passengers, suggesting that people, like machines, carry the marks of where they've been. Windows and mirrors are another motif. The frequent shots of reflections distort or fragment the characters' faces, hinting at the fractured identities they project versus who they really are. There's also the way landscapes shift over the journey, moving from wide, sun-bleached open roads to increasingly narrow, shadowed paths, echoing how the characters' options tighten as the story closes in. Even the way weather plays a role feels deliberate. Sudden storms arrive not at the most convenient dramatic beats, but when emotional climates turn volatile, while stretches of calm skies hint at brief, deceptive lulls. The film also hides small visual repetitions, a discarded coffee cup showing up in different towns, a character's hand brushing over the same scar twice, a song lyric humming faintly in two unrelated scenes, each acting as a soft breadcrumb trail, tying emotional beats together. These touches don't just decorate the story. They operate as subconscious signposts, guiding the viewer toward the undercurrents of regret, inevitability, and the quiet hope that maybe, despite the dents, the journey itself can be enough. If the Pickup 2025 sits inside a franchise, it's the quiet, surprising chapter that quietly reorients what came before and opens new lanes for what comes next. Instead of a blunt sequel that simply ups the action, it functions like a character-driven midquel that deepens the mythology by shrinking the scope, by focusing on a single road trip and the Pickup as a portable archive of secrets. The film expands the world through intimate detail rather than broader spectacle, revealing corners of the franchise's criminal ecosystem, social geography, and recurring characters' backstories that were only hinted at earlier. In that context, it pulls double duty. It rewards longtime viewers with connective tissue, recurring motifs, a reused prop or leitmotif in the score, a secondary character whose past is finally explained, while designing its narrative so newcomers can jump in without needing a dossier. That balance is crucial for franchise health because it avoids alienating casual viewers while deepening emotional stakes for invested fans. Tone-wise, it can act as a recalibration. If earlier installments leaned on adrenaline and scale, the Pickup can pull the franchise toward a grittier, more human vein, proving that the universe is flexible and that smaller stories can carry franchise themes, loyalty, consequence, moral ambiguity just as potently. Creatively, it offers fertile seeds for spin-offs, a diner owner origin piece, a prequel about the stranger, a serialized anthology focused on different journeys and towns, and it models a way to avoid fatigue by varying tone and structure while keeping a coherent visual and sonic language, recurring color palettes, sound motifs, and production design cues, so the series feels unified even as it experiments. Production and continuity issues get interesting here. If the film retcons history, revealed past event or new piece of lore, the writers must honor established canon or deliberately signal a reframe, and casting continuity or aging of actors can be handled through smart choices, time jumps, new performers under director-approved continuity, or in-universe explanations. The smartest franchise moves are subtle. Leave narrative hooks without cheap cliffhangers, deepen the moral architecture rather than simply escalating spectacle, and use this smaller-scale entry to test tonal shifts that could inform larger sequels. Now, if the Pickup 2025 is a historical film instead, the question becomes fidelity versus storytelling and how immersion is manufactured. Effective period portrayal hinges on obsessive attention to micro-details, authentic cars, period-correct signage and fonts, food and cigarette brands of the era, dialect coaching that avoids caricature, costumes that show wear and social class, and background extras behaving with era-appropriate rhythms, because those quotidian textures are what sell the world to the viewer. Historical accuracy isn't just checklisting props. It's about social truth. Whether institutions, gender roles, racial dynamics, and economic pressures are represented responsibly and nuancedly, so the depiction of law enforcement, local power structures, or community norms reads like lived history rather than a posterized backdrop. Filmmaking tools support that authenticity, shooting on lenses that mimic the period's photographic look or grading to suggest it, integrating archival footage or documents in tasteful composites, and using sound design that layers era-appropriate ambient noise while avoiding modern anachronisms in music or Foley. Yet every historical film makes choices: composite characters, compressed timelines, dramatized confrontations, and the art lies in making those compressions feel honest rather than manipulative. Consulting historians and primary sources helps, as does transparent decision-making when events are fictionalized for dramatic clarity. There's also an ethical layer. If the film dramatizes real trauma or political injustice, the creators shoulder responsibility to avoid exploitation and to contextualize, perhaps via careful framing or post-release materials, so the picture contributes to public understanding rather than muddying it. Whether franchise entry or period piece, the common through line is intentionality. Success comes from aligning form and function, using production design, casting, music, and narrative focus to either knit into a larger saga or to convincingly resurrect a past moment, and from treating continuity, accuracy, and audience expectations as creative constraints that, when respected, actually spur richer storytelling rather than limiting it. The Pickup, 2025, isn't a traditional box office story. It premiered as an Amazon/MGM original on Prime Video on August 6, 2025, which immediately changes how you judge budget versus box office, because there was no conventional wide theatrical rollout to produce a public gross to measure against. About Amazon: 1. Because of that straight-to-streaming release strategy, no authoritative theatrical box office tally exists, and studios/platforms typically keep production and marketing spend and their internal viewing metrics close to the chest, so there's no single public line item you can point to that says profit or loss in the way you would for a cinema release. At Reuters. 2. Entertainment Strategy Guy. 3. I searched trade coverage and trade databases while preparing this answer and could not find a reliably reported production budget figure for the film. The usual public pages list cast, crew, and release info, but not an official budget number, which is common for streaming-first titles. Wikipedia. 4. On the qualitative side, the production values read as competent for a mid-level platform pick. Some outlets described it as glossy but underwhelming or even meager in places, which suggests the filmmakers got decent value on screen even if the movie doesn't look like a $150M spectacle. Critics' notes about sparseness and cost-conscious production help explain that the film wasn't built to chase big theatrical spectacle. The Wrap. 5. Money Control. 6. Marketing-wise, Amazon pushed a trailer and platform promotion, official Prime/Amazon pages, and the trailer dropped in the run-up to the August premiere, so visibility was solid inside Prime's ecosystem and on partnered channels, which usually gives a streaming title a strong first-week bump. About Amazon. 1. YouTube. 7. Early indicators of audience attention were mixed. A few industry trackers and outlets flagged the title in Prime's streaming charts, suggesting initial curiosity or platform promotion paid off, but critical response was generally negative, and Rotten Tomatoes/Critics Roundups flagged the film as underperforming creatively. That kind of reception can blunt long-tail engagement on a subscription service. Collider. 8. Rotten Tomatoes. 9. Roger Ebert. 10. Bottom line, and this is where streaming economics matter. Financial success for the Pickup can't be judged by box office totals because none are available. Instead, Amazon will be looking at hours watched, new subscribers acquired or retained because of the title, and how it fits the platform's broader content slate. Independent analysts and trade writers have shown straight-to-streaming titles can succeed on those internal metrics or quietly underperform despite heavy promotion. And without Amazon's internal data, we simply can't say with confidence whether the film made money in accounting terms. Parrot Analytics. 11. Entertainment Strategy Guy. 3. In short, production quality looks serviceable for its remit, Marketing and platform push likely drove initial viewership spikes. Critical reception probably hurt the film's staying power, and because budgets and streaming economics are opaque, you'll need internal platform metrics, which Amazon doesn't publish, to definitively call it a financial hit or miss. 1. https://www.abutamazon.com/news/entertainment/the-pickup-eddie-murphy-prime-video question mark utm_cptcom. The pickup on Prime Video, about Amazon. 2. https://writers.com/business/media-telecom/amazon-prime-video-plots-hollywood-expansion-2024-08-07/??mark-utm_source=sign Amazon Prime Video plots Hollywood expansion. 3. https://word-to-word/one-one/274/1/1/2/straight-to-streaming-films-were-bigger-bombs-than-red-one/????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????? https://e and wikipedia.org/wiki/the_%sign 28film%sign 29 UTM_source =ChatGPT.com the pickup film. 5. https://www therap.com/the-pickup-review-eddie-murphy-pete-davidson/??mark-utm_source=ChatGPT.com the pickup review. Eddie Murphy action comedy is The Rap. 6. https://www.moneycontrol.com/entertainment/the pickup movie review. Eddie Murphy's slick new heist comedy coasts on charm but lacks bite article html_source=the pickup movie review. Eddie Murphy's slick new heist comedy. 7. https://www.youtube.com/watch?mark v=YICGA73LPFE&UTM_source=ChatGPT.com the pickup official trailer Prime Video YouTube. 8. https://colliederivative.com/Eddie Murphy pickup overtakes Ice Cube War of the Worlds Prime Video streaming chart/UTM_source=ChatGPT.com Eddie Murphy's divisive new heist movie unseats Prime Collider. 9. https://www.rotten-tomatoes.com/m/the_pickup?m/the_source=ChatGPT.com the pickup Rotten Tomatoes. 10. https://www.rogerebert.com/reviews/the-pickup-movie-review-2025?ChatGPT.com the pickup movie review and film summary 2025 Roger Ebert. 11. https://www.parrot-analytics.com/academy/how-parrot-analytics-measures-the-value-of-content-in-the-streaming-era-question-UTM_source =Economic How-Parrot-Analytics measures the value of. The pickup is skipping the traditional multiplex route entirely, so you won't find it sandwiched between blockbuster sequels at your local theater. Instead, it's gone straight to Amazon Prime Video, making it instantly accessible for anyone with a subscription. That means you can dive into it from your couch, in bed, or even on a cramped train ride if you're the type who doesn't mind watching car chases on a 5-inch screen. Since this is an Amazon MGM Studios release, it's sitting right in the Prime library with a full promotional push, front page banners, autoplay trailers, and those little recommendation tiles that tempt you after finishing something else. For those who love the immediacy of streaming, this setup is perfect. No ticket queues, no overpriced popcorn, just a click and you're in. And given that the film relies on its brisk pacing and dialogue-heavy setups rather than jaw-dropping IMAX spectacles, it doesn't lose much by not being projected on a massive screen. In fact, the intimacy of watching it at home might even help, letting you catch subtle expressions, throwaway lines, and smaller details that could get lost in a theater's sensory overload. If you want to feel part of the launch buzz, the best time to watch is within its first couple of weeks on the platform, when it's still being pushed hard in new releases and everyone online is either defending or debating it. Pair it with a solid snack spread. Keep your phone nearby to join the conversation, and you'll get the fullest experience of the pickup as both a piece of entertainment and a brief pop culture talking point.